So hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Universe Within podcast. Today's episode, I am sitting down with two people who work here at the Temple of the Way of Light, Zuzana and Lacey. Lacey is one of the yoga teachers here, and Zuzana is a facilitator. So this is a bit of a long podcast. I think it's over 2 hours, but we talked about a bunch of different subjects, about plants, plant medicine, ayahuasca, tobacco, their kind of personal journeys of where they came from, how they started working with these plants, their thoughts about them. And then at the end, we touched a little bit about the last 4 months here during the lockdown and the coronavirus and their thoughts about that. So it was a good episode. I really enjoyed talking to them, and I hope you enjoy it too. Thank you guys for tuning in. Okay, good. So I'm sitting here at the Temple of the Way of Light, the Amazonian Plant Healing Center, with Lacey and Zuzana. Lacey is a yoga teacher here at the Temple of the Way of Light, and Zuzana is a facilitator. So today's episode, well, actually, I'm gonna talk about that in the beginning. So let's just jump into it. So maybe we can start by each of you giving an introduction. Your names, where you're from, and what brought you here to the jungle.
Let's fight over the mic. So yeah, my name is Zuzana. I come from Czech Republic, and I was traveling in Peru, or I always wanted to go to Peru. There was this desire to visit, and I was always fascinated by Incas and all the stories about Peru and Amazon. So I finally decided to come down here in 2012, and then somehow I was guided to come to Iquitos, and then I was introduced to plant medicine, and ever since I kept coming back, and at some point I have decided to just stay here and live here. And yeah, so I didn't come for ayahuasca, even though I knew of it, or plant medicine in general. But it somehow got me into that vortex, as Iquitos has. I think you both know. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey ever since.
And what sparked the interest in plant medicine?
So I was always looking for, or I was trained in massages and energetic work, and I always liked the approach that it's perceiving humans holistically, or that it's not only body, that it's, there is a spirit, there is a soul. So that was something that was really appealing to me. And when I got introduced to the way of learning, or the way the plants are teaching, that was something I was amazed by and completely drawn into, the way of learning through experience. So that was it. That was like, yay.
And did you like have any familiarity with plants before coming to Peru?
Not really. Maybe like common plant remedies that we use in Europe. Like for instance, when you have a cold. So just do this. Not really into depth of what is dieting and like isolating and all that I experienced here, but yet it definitely felt very familiar when I started that process, or kind of natural.
And how did you find that first in Peru?
First I was introduced to ayahuasca through a friend who invited me to a ceremony, and I was really amazed. My first time I was just sitting in the ceremony without drinking the medicine, and I was just amazed what it was doing with me, to extent of having very light visions in the ceremony. And I'm like, this is interesting, and it felt like welcome or invitation to drink the medicine. And then again through friends, I got to meet my future maestro, and yeah, again it was kind of, I was led into like meeting these people in the right time, and it just was like pushing me on the journey, or leading me. So yeah.
And then how did you end up at the Temple of the Way of Light?
So I pretty much knew people who worked here, including you. And one day I just got invitation to come over and to see if we fit. It felt like I was saying that it was like a date, like dating, to meet Temple and to see like how we like each other. And when I came here and started to shadow, just to participate in the workshop, it was pretty clear there is mutual attraction there. So I stayed.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Well, my name is Lacey. I'm originally from Las Vegas, and my journey with plants began in 2010. It started with Wachuma. I got introduced to Wachuma by two very special people who I consider mentors to some degree, one of which, her name is Shamama. She's the one that has definitely been my North Star on this path. And she had been working with plant medicine for quite some time, including ayahuasca. And I'd heard about ayahuasca before, but never felt a strong call to come to Peru. But yeah, I was working with Wachuma for about a year before I decided to come down to Peru in 2011. And that was my introduction to ayahuasca the first time. And that was a plant that I immediately connected with. And yeah, it shifted everything. And I knew that I needed to continue on with this work. And so I started to work with ceremonies in Las Vegas. Eventually, I went out to the UK. I continued working with plant medicine out there in Wales. And I came to the temple from a dear friend, Martha, who is a yoga teacher. She was teaching here for a while. And I met her through Instagram, of all places. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I'm very grateful for the connection. I had been putting out there, this was 2018, I just kept feeling the pull to return to Peru, and I was thinking maybe I should do or lead some sort of a yoga retreat so that I can come down here but also continue working with the medicine but also be working at the same time. And I was trying to figure out, like, okay, what can I do to work down in Peru while still continue on my own healing journey. And one day I was just scrolling through Instagram hashtags. I don't remember which one. It was probably just hashtag yoga or something. And I saw a picture of a woman doing dancer's pose at Machu Picchu. I could tell that it was Incan ruins. And so the caption read something to the degree of, "Are you a traveling yoga teacher and do you have a passion for plant medicines? If yes, get in touch." And I commented like, I love traveling and I love ayahuasca. And lo and behold, that was my introduction to Martha. She reached out and said, hey, there's this place in the Amazon jungle that is looking for yoga teachers. Are you interested? Apparently they needed someone right away, but I had plans for that summer, and the earliest that I could come out was the beginning of 2019. And I did, and the rest is history. I began working here January of 2019, and I didn't think that I was going to return so soon. I thought maybe 2020, but I found myself back here in summer of 2019 and haven't really left. I went back to the U.S. to visit my mom for Christmas, but I feel like my roots are growing pretty strong here now. So
yeah, good. So I would imagine a lot of our audience is familiar with plant medicines, but some may not be also. So maybe could you all talk about what plant medicines means to you? We'll start with you.
For me, plant medicine is a tool. Yeah.
Gonna be swatting mosquitoes, by the way.
Wow, that's a tricky one, because there are so many answers. But right now, I would say first of all is passion for me. Something for me, plant medicine is a tool to connect with myself, to others, to the nature, to the spiritual aspect of myself. Yeah, kind of, again, like complex tool that helps me to come back to myself.
And why would someone be interested in working with plants?
Because it's great. What I like about plants is when we say we are doing the work, there is so much reward, and that reward comes with me putting an effort, all the love and care into really growing, just like the plant. So it's just like, for me, like I said, when I first got introduced to dieting, I felt this is the most amazing way to learn through experience. So it's like entering different realm, and of course there are many plants we work with. So if we take ayahuasca as a master plant, as a teacher, that takes you like away from this reality, or opens or widens the view of reality as it is. It's a little bit different to... Yeah, I lost myself in there. It happens to me when I speak about these things.
Yeah. I mean, so for example, in the workshops here, we're working with 23, 24 people every 9 days, 12 days, 23 days. What would you say, based on your experience, why are most people coming to work with plants, especially here with ayahuasca? Let's use that as an example. From your experience, why are people drawn to work with ayahuasca or just plant medicine in general?
Like, I would say that many people come because they already exhausted all their options. Definitely everybody is looking for something authentic, if it's within themselves or in their lives in general. And they either exhausted all the options. Some people come with certain medical conditions that they try to address, and again they exhausted all possible options that the Western medicine offers them. For many people, they would say it's a curiosity. I believe there is always something behind the curiosity, that it's not pure like, oh, let's go to the Amazon and try ayahuasca. I haven't tried that, so I don't think, especially to temple, that people would come for like this reason. There is usually intention behind that, and many people already are aware of why they are here and why they want to work with plants. But from what I'm seeing, also people who come to temple, I wouldn't say that it's like certain type of people. I'm always surprised that people that wouldn't expect that they would come here and drink the medicine, they show up and they're having amazing experiences. So probably there is this, and that's my personal opinion, that people are really looking for something, as I said at the beginning, and they're not finding it. So it takes them to take this long journey and to see maybe there. And I think the whole world now knows about ayahuasca. It has more publicity, so.
And do you have a sense of what that is that people are looking for, kind of in general terms, based on the people you're seeing that you're working with?
I would say, if I boil it down to, because of course people would come and they say, okay, I want to work on my patterns, or I want to have happier life. There is so if I follow that track, usually it goes down to simple joy and peace, I think. That's what I'm hearing. And living authentic life. Just be happy with whoever I am.
And how do you think these plants are able to bring that about, joy and peace in someone?
With ayahuasca, I think there's a gift by somehow, as I said, opening or broadening the view of reality. There's a gift of giving us different perspective. Sometimes already that can be life-changing, just to look at certain situation, look at ourselves in a different way, from a different angle. So already that can be just life-changing. And sometimes it is showing us, or we are taught, the way we could be better. No, that's not it. Again, show us different perspective and how to achieve it. So it's not really like an oracle, but there is this gift. If I authentically come with, okay, this is who I am. I'm opening myself to. Please help me with that. I'm looking for something, and I know what it is. Then, through the process, this usually is revealed. And then it's up to me what I do with that. So that's another part of what I really love about this medicine. It's not a magical pill, or it's not something that is instantly happening, but it takes, my effort, kind of to meet that. It doesn't mean it can go to extreme, digging and fixing, but there is this opportunity to being shown something or feel something and then following that path. But that's up to me to make the steps. So it's not passive, it acquires my effort or my willingness.
Yeah, great. Do you want to? So yeah, from your perspective, what is plant medicine?
That's a big question, Jason.
It is.
And it's so individual, because if you ask 20 different people what they think plant medicine is, you're going to get 20 different answers. For me, plant medicine has always been about healing, but then also about authenticity and really not having a place to outrun my bullshit. It's always been something that keeps me wildly honest with myself, and to kind of echo what Zuzana was saying, it provides the opportunity to see things from a very different perspective, and for me personally, it has been amazing to help kind of just rewire a lot of things that I held as 100% truthful, and showed me my own patterns, my beliefs, my views, and things like that felt almost crystallized, like things that I couldn't overcome on my own. And working particularly, especially with ayahuasca, has helped me to just soften and open, and it's been a wonderful gift, but not the easiest. It's been very challenging. And that's partially why I keep coming back to it, is because it forces me to confront things that I may not even be aware that I'm trying to avoid, or trying to outrun, or try not to feel. It's easy to get caught up with life and bypass things, or just claim, oh, well, that's just the way that I am because of this and this and this. And so that insight that I gained from ceremony and the things that I learned from it have been imperative to my own process of healing and growing.
Yeah, good. Those are all things that really resonate with me too, the rewiring, seeing things from a different perspective. You guys both mentioned dieting. Again, some of the audience may be familiar with that. Probably a big portion is not. You can keep the mic.
I'm putting it
back in the middle.
So
yeah. So, what is dieting?
Go for it.
Oh, yeah. I'm still fairly new to the dieting process. I started last year, and I've had 3 diets, and it was something that was actually encouraged by my shamama, my wonderful shamama, back in 2012. And at that point, I'd been working with Huachuma. For those of you that don't know, Huachuma is another Peruvian medicine. It's a cactus medicine grown in the Andes. It's very different from ayahuasca, but so I'd been working with Huachuma for 2 years and ayahuasca for 1 year, and she was already suggesting this idea of dieting, and she kind of explained what it was about like going into isolation with a plant, and it just didn't call to me then, because I think I was still chasing the visionary experience, the almost psychedelic experience of these plant medicines, which is a beautiful part of it, but that's definitely not the that's not the trophy at the end, for sure. But so considering I'm still new to it, dieting has it's taken me a lot deeper within myself. And I can say personally, it has helped me to confront a lot of the things that I was still pushing away, that I wasn't even aware that I was pushing away, particularly around deep patterns that deep patterns that I've had around like my family, childhood, a painful past, and things like that. And I didn't realize how deep I could go with the plants. I didn't realize how deep I could go within myself, how deep I could go into the territory of exploring and like navigating really difficult emotions that I had been keeping my whole life, and storing in my body, storing in my mind. And so it was one thing that kind of helped me to plunge into the deep end to really start to get at the root of a lot of the things that were constant patterns in my life and very unhealthy, toxic patterns. So it's it's been an amazing process, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of it. Many more diets ahead for me, and I've been very grateful for the maestros and maestras that have held that space for me, Zuzana being one of them, and then two healers here, Maestro Damian and Maestra Lila. Incredible healers.
Yeah, good. So you have quite a bit of experience of dieting and even running diets for people. So what, maybe can you talk a bit about what that process is? Why would someone want a diet? What does that look like?
So when I first came down to Peru and met my maestro, my teacher, I didn't know about dieting at all, and so my teacher, he works with tobacco, which is like not so. If people think about Peru and plant medicine, everybody or like people know ayahuasca. Tobacco, not so much, even though tobacco is very much present in ceremonies and in work with other sacred plants known through Amazon. But anyway, I met my teacher who works with this plant as his master plant. And I was just like curious, like, what is this about? But meeting him was interesting because I drank ayahuasca and I kind of felt like, okay, this is good. I'm like falling in love with myself and everything is perfect. And when I met him, he was like brutally honest, and he kind of bursted my bubble of that I'm completely fine. And he was like, no, we are working on deeper stuff, and for that tobacco is perfect medicine. So at the beginning, when I heard that, of course, my first reaction was like, oh yeah, what else would you told me? You're tabaquero. But then I was really impressed by his presence, and I was like, okay, I want to give it a chance. And I already knew through my friends who has worked with him that it's very profound work that he's doing or guiding people to do. So I came back to Peru and decided to do tobacco diet, which tobacco is very purgative medicine. So it's a deep process of cleaning and opening and centering. And that got me really hard. It was like the hardest thing I have ever done, really. But at the same time, I felt pretty much liberated and kind of cleaned. The tobacco works a lot in the dream, so in the diet I was dreaming a lot, and it's kind of like going through the garbage and getting away the like processing a lot. So I was interested, and then I came to address certain health issue, which I then got prescribed another diet, which was for me the breaking point where I was like, okay, this is amazing if I can, because in the diet I felt so authentic and so content with myself, with the environment. It was kind of like this wow moment of just being, kind of, I would call that bliss. And I'm like, wow, if I can experience it with plants, I want to continue in this journey. But pretty much I continued the process with him and dieting certain plants that were chosen for me by him. Still somehow for myself. I never had the idea of becoming a healer or holding space for other people or offering this medicine. Towards the very end, when it was pure love for the medicine, and then it was clear to me that it's something that I would like to share with people. And still continue working for myself. So pretty much that. Did I answer the question?
Mm-hmm. So if people, again, a lot of people are familiar with this work. Probably a lot of people aren't too. And from a lot of the countries, the cultures we come from, this work is actually in many places illegal. It's illegal to work with plants like ayahuasca. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's been this kind of distancing from that? I think a lot of people, as you said, some of these plants have this psychedelic aspect. Why do you think there's so much resistance to that? A lot of these plants are really demonized, even kind of looked upon as maybe escaping or as if they're drugs and they're bad. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question. And I think, but also if I start with how generally plant medicine, or as I was talking about, just pure herbalism, or we get into this conversation about homeopathics. There are many people who say like, homeopathics, what is it? It's like 0.0001 of something. It doesn't, you cannot measure it. So this doesn't work. It's a scam. It's a placebo, and then you have other people who swear by it. And then in that system of how we perceive Western medicine, it's like we need a proof, like we need a laboratory proof for something to say, okay, this works. And still, so even with like herbalism and some, remedies or like natural remedies, you cannot really, at least I know it's in European Union is this way, you cannot really claim that this plant is a cure for cancer or this plant is a cure for liver. You cannot claim that because you don't have like laboratory proofs. So even there I'm sensing certain, we are afraid that people would widely start to use this medicine, or they would like step into power of like healing themselves, because that's the plant medicine. I'm growing my own medicine, I'm stepping into power. And ayahuasca, it's pretty much about this, and you both guys know it. Like when people come here and they realize, okay, this is like, again, as I was saying, it requires to take my part. It requires me to do something. It's a very different concept from like going to a doctor and, okay, you got this. Okay, let's prescribe you this. Come back in 1 month. It's different. And I truly believe that this work or work with plants empowers people. And without going into any conspiracy, like, does our society want empowered people? Does this society want people who are happy, content, and, who can think for themselves? Mic drop.
Do I need to add anything to that?
Maybe just actually, we can probably put the mic in the center now. It was raining a bit, so the audio was a little funky, but yeah.
Muy bien. Yes, to echo everything that you just said. I think part of the reason why it's been illegal is because of the government money. Even if you take it back before plant medicine and go to initially like psychedelics, LSD and things like that, and the the opening that a lot of people experience and things like that. I think to make these plants, I mean, plants kind of followed that, but to make chemicals and plants and stuff that have the tendency to expand consciousness, I'm going to use that term very loosely here, that also means that people aren't going to be as docile or as easily controlled. And so I do think that there is a little bit of some conspiracy theory within that. But the war on drugs has allowed America to spend millions and millions and millions, probably, I'm sure billions, I don't know the number at this point, but a lot of money to fuel that, to make things illegal. But it is really nice to see that shifting. I mean, we're seeing that psilocybin mushrooms have been decriminalized in Oakland, and there's a lot more scientific research proving that psilocybin mushrooms can help with depression or anxiety or PTSD. Same goes with MDMA. They're testing and researching ketamine for depression as well. And I personally don't use MDMA or ketamine. I believe more of a holistic approach with plants, but I mean, it's all kind of tied into the same thing. You know, the government and stuff is going to recognize plant medicine, particularly where the psychoactive ingredient is dimethyltryptamine. They're going to say that's the same as DMT, even though they're two very different things, to drink it in a plant versus, say, smoking it. And so it's really nice to see that things are shifting and moving in a different direction, and that people are becoming more open-minded to these types of medicines. And I mean, even to working here and seeing medical doctors passing through as guests of these retreats, I think says a lot, because these are people that have spent a lot of time and energy in their medical schools and in their practices and everything, and to see even them being open-minded enough to come and experience a completely different type of healing than what they're used to. It says a lot for the direction in which this is moving.
And I think that's something really interesting about being here too, is, seeing 23, 24 people who come every workshop. And as you guys said, there's people coming from all different backgrounds, and it's very much not what maybe a preconceived notion of someone who is doing this work would be. It's doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs and really people from all walks of life. You mentioned something, this idea of LSD and synthetics. So what is the difference for you all between a synthetic medicine, something like LSD that's actually made in a laboratory, something like MDMA, versus a plant medicine, a medicine that's actually using the plant in its entirety?
For me personally, I don't like to demonize chemicals or like psychedelics and things like that. I think they have their place, and I've had my own experiences with them. In fact, it was my own experiences that I think kept me open-minded enough to try plant medicine and then pursue this path. So I do believe that there's healing qualities within those avenues of the chemical, the chemical molecules and things like that. I'm actually still open to LSD just because it's like a hybrid. It's part chemical and part natural. But for me, with plant medicines, I like the connection that I can actually feel in the medicine itself, of like this grew from the earth. There seems to be something very deep and familiar with it. So every time that I'm in ceremony, it's not just it's not like what I would experience, say, on something like LSD or MDMA is. It's not exactly psychedelic like LSD per se, but there's something that feels very ancient, very genuine, and very connecting within that medicine. And I think part of that is the fact that it comes from the earth. It grew in the soil. It was nourished by the rain. It was nourished by the sun. You're getting all of these natural elements that are within our own lives to be here and live in harmony with these plants and everything. And I think it's literally like taking it back to the source, because we live in the nature, and the nature provides for us, and we get our food from the nature, we get our medicines from the nature. And so I think this is a way to tap into that ancient system, that ancient connection. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I totally resonate with this. For me, another part is actually as what we see here. People don't come here and we don't offer them ayahuasca and they sit in a ceremonial setup by themselves just drinking. There are healers working with people. So for me, someone as a guide with working with any medicine, it's very important. Someone who holds space, and especially with plants like ayahuasca or even psychedelics, somebody who can be there as your anchor or a lighthouse, someone who takes you on the journey and knows how to bring you back, or how to wait there for you to come back, if I put it into this symbolic language. But also, like, same for me, what I experienced when I first was present in the ceremony, and I wasn't even drinking medicine, and I could strongly feel how the plant is working with me. It was done through the healer who was there and who was singing the healing songs, which is, again, I don't know how people are familiar, but in the tradition that we work here in temple, there are healers who would sing what we call Icaros. So those are healing vibrations that the healers received from the plants itself. So again, I like this idea of the cycle of a healer who walked their path, went through process of dieting, connecting with plants, learning from plants, and then using that energy to put into preparing the medicine, into like harvesting. So when the ayahuasca is being made, when it's being harvested, is always with like very pure intention, and all that energy is put into when the brew is being prepared. Again, the healer or the person who prepares the medicine puts all their intention and attention to what they're making, and then they come, they sit in front of you, they give you the medicine, and then they sing you back. So it creates this like cycle, or the cycle is like continuing. I don't know. So, and if I take, let's say again, I don't want to demonize as well like any chemicals, but it feels like it would be castrated from this whole process that I see. It's very important. Just taking a part of, it could be even like taking a part of the plant and just forgetting the rest and just create it into something that, kind of like instant food, that's how I see it. But
well, you guys, you both mentioned something interesting, which was this idea of psychedelics. But you both said that, you said this, Lacey, that for you the root of this work isn't psychedelic. It's something much deeper. The reprogramming, the peace, the joy, and it's something that the doctors we work with here say a lot. They would say something like, if you want to see a movie, if you want to have a psychedelic experience, go to the movie theater, go to YouTube or something. That's not what this work is. Why do you think there's this kind of conflation between even this idea of psychedelics, that these plants are somehow producing a psychedelic state and that's the goal, rather than what I'm hearing you all saying, which is the goal is actually something much more simple, this idea of peace, of joy, of wisdom, of seeing things from a different perspective? Why do so many people have this idea that these plants are just purely psychedelic?
Well, because it sounds very appealing, I think, to come to a ceremony and experience something like mind-blowing and having the visions or the visual part. And I think and I remember before I came to Peru, somebody was warning me and telling me, like, okay, there you might meet ayahuasca there, and I just want to warn you that this may be they were actually saying you might see things, but it would be like seeing it behind the glass. It's not like that. It can give you like certain perspective, but when you kind of go back to your reality, it suddenly becomes distant. And we also hear from people when first they come here and they experience something mind-blowing, and then they go back home and suddenly it feels like it fades away. But anyway, what I wanted to speak about, that there's this sense of escape, because it can be like, okay, I feel really good when I connect with the plants, when I drink. Let's have another ceremony, and let's have another one. And maybe there I will finally find peace that's going to stay with me in my life. But it doesn't work like that. You know, I believe that the medicine is here to hint us, to guide us, to show us how things could be, and then it's up to us to bring it to our life. And again, it can happen by like shifting or changing perspective, but most likely it's something that we have to like walk. We have to get there. So there is this kind of danger. I don't know if it's a danger. It's kind of like a tricky part that someone get attached to, kind of like seeing the things. Because maybe my life is not that interesting. It's way more interesting when I see it in colors and like, you know, could be that. But I don't want to simplify that, but I'm pretty much aware of this. For me, it's really about like bringing magic back to my life rather than going somewhere and experience magic. It's just, and that's what I have experienced, kind of like, okay, if I can experience this with plants, like while I'm dieting, or this feeling of bliss, I want that in my life.
So then why do you think these plants sometimes do produce a psychedelic effect, if that's not the goal that they're trying to achieve? What do you think that's inducing?
Like, for me, it's kind of like a side effect, like something that is like, and then for many people it's different. Some people don't experience the visual part. We always talk about, we usually explain the difference between visions and visuals. That vision doesn't necessarily mean that I'm seeing something visually. It could be like this very physical feeling. It could be the sense of knowing. Some people, they hear voice like guiding them, telling them. So again, I think it's something that shows, like if I talk about myself, that shows me again what I said. It's like in my real life I'm seeing maybe this, and the magic of the plant medicine is like suddenly it gets wider. It's like, oh, there's more stuff, and I'm actually feeling this, or I'm seeing this. Like, is this real? Is this not real? So that's kind of something that maybe helps us to use our brain in like wider capacity. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I think there's a strong emphasis when people are first introduced. I think there's a strong emphasis when people first hear about ayahuasca and go online and research it or watch these videos on YouTube and everything. There's a strong emphasis on the visions or the visionary experience or the trip or however you want to label it. And I'll be honest, I was one of those people in the beginning because I had, gone through a heavy stage of trying just about any psychedelic that I could get my hands onto before I was introduced to plant medicine. Initially, it was for me more of a tripping kind of experience. I'll put that in quotes. And what I was getting out of it after each ceremony was far greater than anything I'd ever experienced, and that was really what kept me coming back. It wasn't the visions or the things that I saw in ceremony and things like that. It was what I was getting out of it afterwards, and the insights and the shifts that were happening internally, which to then of course I experienced externally of myself. It's funny because especially working here, you hear a lot of guests that almost complain that I didn't experience any visions, like the medicine isn't working, I'm not seeing anything. But then their neighbor in a group share is talking about oh, I saw these fractals and then I saw this and I saw that. And I think it's our natural human inclination to be drawn and be curious to mystical experiences, and I think that's part of the pull to shamanism, and especially times like I say right now we are in the middle of a pandemic, so it's a little bit extraordinary. But I think in modern times, people are seeking more holistic approaches to healing and stuff like that. But particularly when they hear about mystical experiences in the Amazon rainforest with indigenous shamans and things like that, that has a huge pull. And people are very curious about that. And if that comes with perhaps visionary experiences, like game on, where do I sign up? But I think a lot of people don't realize that if you have the visions or if you don't have the visions, that's just a very small part of what this work actually is and what you gain from it, what you benefit from it. I mean, yeah, it's great if it happens, but I always like to think, don't get too attached to your visions. They come, they go. Some ceremonies, they're very strong. Other ceremonies, you might not have any. But ultimately, what you get after ceremony, and particularly the integration and putting into practice what you learn in ceremony, the insights, like what Zuzana was saying, the insights or the downloads, the broadening of the perspective, just after that, practicing what you learn and putting into practice those gifts and tools that sometimes you're handed in the ceremonial experience.
Yeah, so one of the real benefits of working here is we do work with so many people, so we get to see so many people's experiences. So you both mentioned it's not necessarily just a psychedelic experience. So maybe you all could talk about what is someone's experience. Some people who come down, what are kind of archetypical experiences that people go through? If maybe some people have never worked with these plants, maybe some have worked with these plants, but not in this more kind of traditional holistic way of working. So what are people's journeys? Like when someone comes down from the moment they come to the moment they leave, what are different journeys? What do they look like?
I think for many people already, changing the environment, getting out of their comfort zone and coming to the Amazon, which is it can be the jungle. It's rough, even though of course the facilities here are really comfortable, or it's very accommodating, but still many people come for the first time to a place that it's, let's say, wild, and so already stepping out of their comfort zone and joining a group of another 22 people and strangers and kind of no, what have I signed up for? Already that, I think it's very important for some people, and they keep mentioning it, like that the environment. And what I find, I was sometimes thinking if we would bring the people here without giving them any medicine and just having a retreat in the jungle, meeting 22 other strangers, what it would do, just like getting people off their phones, and just be in the jungle. Only that by itself, I think it's a big factor for many people, just to getting out of the routine and changing the environment. And then it very much depends on many factors, I would say. But even people who would come here and they went through the process of ceremonies, and maybe even in the whole process they didn't feel that they would get somewhere deep. This medicine, it's very much about confrontation, I would say. It's very much about being, if I'm open, I'm being confronted or being guided, but it's done in a way that sometimes can feel like sort of fight. But I would say it's like fight myself against myself. That's what I see like very common here. But sometimes people, we always talk about allowing and letting go, and also the maestros, they would always say, okay, just come with no expectations, open mind, open heart, and come and meet the medicine. That's how they instruct people to come to the ceremonies. But it's not always easy, and I can see just on it's like very simple to say, don't come with any expectations, and personally we are humans, we have expectations, and we will always have expectations. So I don't know where I was going with that.
What are some of the things that come up in a ceremony? And maybe first, like, what is a ceremony? Why is this work done in a ceremony? And then what are different things that come up?
Mm-hmm. So this medicine, I would say, it's pretty much about collective healing. So there is a huge power of like all these people coming together and sitting together in a circle. So ceremony happens in a space that we call Moloka, which is a communal space. So everybody sits down, the medicine is drank after the sun goes down, and the healers, they come in and the medicine is offered, and everybody goes through the experience together, even though everybody has pretty much their individual process, and everybody. So it's almost, I also find this like very fascinating that the same room, same medicine, of course everybody is drinking different amounts of medicine, but like completely different experience. Yet there is this sense of connection, sense of community, which I find it's very important part of the healing.
Many people describe like a sense of oneness or connection. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, very, very much so. So yeah, it can be that at the same time, one person experiencing the bliss, the most amazing things in their life that they might not ever experience before, and another person is taken to a little deeper into more like shadow side of whatever they go through. So not very nice experience. But and then it's up to how do we process that, and that's again, like, as we were talking about why people come here, some people may expect, okay, it's going to show me amazing things. Nobody comes here, I think, nobody comes here to experience like bad things. But it comes together. It's like, it's not only about like bliss and butterflies and unicorns. And for many people, which I'm seeing going through difficult experiences or facing like shadow aspects of themselves, they would say, okay, this was something that actually helped me more than if I was seeing like butterflies and unicorns. Oops, sorry.
Do you want to talk a bit about that? Just different things that come up for people, what you've seen people go through?
It's funny because it's what the one thing that is quite consistent is that upon arrival, you can feel the tension with the group as soon as they arrive. They just came in from Iquitos. Iquitos itself has quite a chaotic energy, and it's a pretty intense jungle city. And so they arrive here in the nature, in the jungle, and ready to receive their plant bath to kind of wash away, Iquitos and crazy energies and stuff. But you can sense the nervousness. I mean, some people come in more on the side of excitement, but a lot of them are getting the pre-ceremony jitters, as I like to say, and for the most part, it's pretty consistent that people arrive nervous, and with good reason. And I work mostly on Center 2, teaching yoga. I've worked on both centers, so for those of you that are not familiar with the temple, the Center 1 has the shorter retreats, so there's the 9-day and the 12-day retreats, and Center 2 has the longer retreats, which are 14 days or 23 days, and those offer more like classes and yoga and things like that. So I've worked mostly on Center 2, and which means that I've had the pleasure to be with guests for longer periods of time and really see their entire process from the time that they arrive until the time that they leave. And that they come in quite nervous, and everyone is on their own individual journey. But particularly those longer retreats, it's you see people, even if they're coming in with a bit of excitement, almost always at some point they kind of start to plunge a little bit into like what Zuzana was referring to as like the shadow work, which I think is another expectation that people have around plant medicine, especially with ayahuasca, that this is all about expanding my consciousness and love and light, and there is very much that element to it for sure, without a doubt. But the real work, the stuff that really moves things out and shifts the patterns and rewires is the shadow work, the things that we don't want to face and the things that we don't want to feel or don't want to confront and things like that. And so for the most part, I would say I see people usually by ceremony 2 or 3 out of the 7 that they'll be drinking in like a 23-day retreat. That's when the maybe excitement starts to fade off a little bit. The emotions, it just starts to get a bit more mosquito. It starts to get more intense for sure after usually ceremony 2, ceremony 3. Usually by ceremony 4, by ceremony 5, they are, we'll say, hair is on fire and and then as they close, coming to the close of ceremony 6 and their arcana ceremony, ceremony number 7, for the most part, you kind of see this cycle of their process and coming around and finishing in a good space. And just feeling really blessed and grateful to leave. And for me, one of the most rewarding parts about working here is seeing literally how the faces change, feeling how people leave completely different than how they arrived. I see the eyes change and the face changes, the heaviness that people come here to to confront or to leave in the jungle, and the lightness that is literally like glowing from their skin. I always call it the ayahuasca afterglow, but it is literally a visual difference within seeing people when they first arrive versus when they leave. And the feeling as well, the energetic feeling of that lightness and that clarity and that groundedness as well. They've been working with Shipibo medicine, Shipibo healers, and there is something incredibly grounding with this particular style of tradition.
So you mentioned shadow work, and that's something, if people have done this work, they've probably heard of. And in a lot of kind of alternative therapies, there's this idea of shadow work. What are examples of that? What would come up that would be considered shadow work for people?
Well, they refer to the shadow or the aspects within ourselves that we reject from psychological standpoint. And for me, when I've witnessed it in guests, it's often the experiences that they've had, or the traumas or the pains that are not fully integrated, or that they've tried to suppress or they've tried to ignore and things like that. And so if that means almost in a sense reliving really traumatic experiences in ceremony, that's going into the shadow aspect and allowing yourself to sit with those emotions, to sit with that most often pain that a lot of people are carrying with them and things like that. Or it could be as far as like confronting aspects within themselves that they are feeling a lot of guilt about or a lot of shame. These emotions that are labeled as negative or wrong, so anger or guilt or shame, these are like these heavy emotions that a lot of people, one, don't want to feel, and two, don't know how to navigate, and so they use avoidant behavior, or they numb it with drugs or alcohol or workaholism or whatever. And this is why I love this medicine, is because there's nowhere to hide in that space. And I always put full trust into the medicine that I'm gonna get what I receive, and as with the guests, they're gonna get what they need, not necessarily what they want out of the experience. And so they come, and so long as there isn't too much resistance, and we talk about this with guests throughout the retreat, to just breathe and relax and surrender. And to trust, we say that a lot in the retreats, to just trust this process, trust the healers, trust the medicine. And I think this is why, particularly these retreats, working with people healers, people leave very pleasantly surprised with what they get out of this experience, because it almost always exceeds their expectations. They come in with the expectation, perhaps just I'm going to see some visions and stuff like that, but with the things that they can feel that have moved out or have become less heavy or less dense within themselves. That's one of the many gifts that they take with them from the Amazon.
Something you both mentioned too, this idea of personal responsibility and power. Without getting too political, but it seems like we're living in a time where, in many ways, that's almost shunned. There's almost this sense of, even in this work, we talk a lot about trauma, and from what I see, that there's almost this like fetishization of that kind of the identity with I am my trauma, and therefore I can be this, and this way, and it's justified. But something you mentioned was this idea of personal power, of responsibility. Why do you think that's so important, and why do you think this medicine seems to be embodying people with that sense of responsibility and power?
Why? It's really, I don't know, it can be tricky as well. It's like, if I take it for myself, it was always easier, I call it my past life, to be kind of like within my life, to be, not to feel that I'm like responsible for the way I live, to be like stuck in certain patterns, get excuses, and to like, my life is this way. because it just is. There is like no, like I'm not responsible for my life, yet I am, and like this magic of just like suddenly like feeling that I am responsible for my life. That's delicious. Like it's hard, but at the same time, that's amazing. So why not to have it?
Delicious.
It's delicious. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say. I cannot imagine going back into and I tried like after I spent some time here, I went back to my country and I just felt there is no way back to the old ways, to the way I was living, like working 9-to-5 job in the office. And that was like, for me personally, I just knew, okay, like there is no way back, but what is the way forward? And I just trusted, there is something on the other side. I will follow that, but
For many people coming down, they are going to be coming from a 9-to-5 job. So how does one take what they learn and then, this is a really common theme that's talked about in this work is integration. How does someone take what they've learned from these plants and then integrate it back into their life of a 9-to-5 job?
I just want to say I'm speaking from my own personal experience, so I'm not imposing anything that all the 9-to-5 jobs are like really bad and that everybody is meant to move to Amazon and to live here. That's not sustainable. It was my journey and I accepted that. But
because also with this, because that's a really good point. Many people come down and with this idea of I need to find my purpose or I need to find my path. And often when people go back, they start questioning these things like, is my job the right one? Is my partner the right one? So I guess what's the difference between maybe also someone, so first of all, how does someone integrate that back into their lives? And then maybe how does someone necessarily know where they need to change, where they need to completely shift their life around, or how do they somehow maybe accept what they have and where they're at, and what's the difference between that? I know that's a pretty big question, but it's something a lot of people, that's one of the big things people kind of struggle with after they leave.
It's I usually tell people like at the end, whatever you have experienced here, and if you experienced like the essence, I call it like the essence of the medicine, the truth, the authenticity. Like now you know how it tastes, and when you go back, look for the same taste. And sometimes, like going back, suddenly you can see, or like what happened to me, it was like, okay, my lifestyle is not sustainable. My lifestyle no longer serves me, and I have to make some change. And it wasn't immediate. I had to, like, of course, still pay my rent and, kind of finding, but I would follow that, okay, what could make me feel the same way I felt when I was back in Peru? What was the essence? Just like this, like joy and authentic and being content, like with what I had. And that was like the first step, because I remember when I first came back from Peru, I somehow didn't want to be back. Of course, I wanted to stay in Peru and continue work. I was like just amazed, but I just had to go back to my country, and I was like, I don't want to be here. Like everything wanted to be back. And then I remember this magical moment. I was going on a bus and I saw the sunrise, and I'm like, why do I dislike this city, or why do I dislike my life here? Like, look at that, like the sun is coming up, and like you're lucky to be here. Just like the gratitude, which I also feel it's very important in this process, to be grateful for what you got. Massive attack. So yeah, just and I felt like, okay, and at some point I was like, it doesn't matter what I do, it matters how I feel while I'm doing it, in terms of work, for instance. So at some point I decided, okay, I'm not going back to the office, but I want to make coffee. And suddenly it was like the best idea, and I loved it, and it was like simple, and it was bringing me joy, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, and let's see what happens next, but life is short to be miserable. Mic drop.
Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe from your experience?
Yeah. Integration, the big I word. I think it's really important. A lot of people that come here are coming from city environments, and I think one of the things that touches them so deeply, outside of the firsthand experience with medicine and everything, is being back in nature, being off their phones, being in a completely natural environment. I mean, like you said, the jungle is challenging. It's not an easy environment per se, but there's something that is like returning home when we're back in a natural environment, when we're breathing fresh air, where there isn't the constant distraction of screens and, like electric poles and like all these things that I think people just kind of get used to in a city environment. And so I think one of the important things with integration is when people do go back home, one of them is to stay close to nature. So if that means like going for a walk in a park or going hiking or something like that, I think that's really powerful to reconnect with that feeling that you are always connected to Mother Earth, and that's one way to stay grounded. Obviously, for me as a yoga teacher, I'm just going to plug in yoga. When it comes to integration, my personal path with plant medicine has, from the very beginning, been very intertwined with my yoga practice. Part of that is feeling within my body on a physical level what moved out in ceremony, because I use asanas as a way to almost as like a tool to feel where my body has opened, where it wasn't open before. So specific yoga poses, particularly in back bends, opening my chest, opening my shoulders and things like that, where places in my body had felt stiff or locked up, and then feeling such a massive difference after ceremony in my integration process. I could feel it physically in my body. I could see it in the poses. I could feel the depth, my range of motion, everything improving. And so I always kind of interconnected the two, yoga with plant medicine, and I'm really grateful that the temple offers these practices not only during the retreats, and especially in Center 2 where you have the longer retreats, so people kind of get into this regimen of meditation and breath work and yoga while they're going through their process and while they're experiencing the ceremonies, preparing their body, easing their anxiety, opening the joints, opening and stretching the fascia, so that the medicine, in a sense, can penetrate deeper into the body, but then also having that almost become a bit of a habit every day to practice yoga, or to just sit and be silent and still and take some deep breaths. These are tools that people can take outside of the ceremony context and go home, and they have this wonderful toolbox to explore and to help ground during their integration. And for me as well, like the stretching with yoga in combination with breath work, this can really help, of course, stay grounded, but move out a lot of like dense kind of sticky energies within the body. The medicine works on the physical plane. It works with mind, body, spirit, and yoga and meditation touch on the same things. They're mind, body, spirit practices, which is why I've always felt that they go hand in hand. And so, yeah, with integration, the being connected with nature, having these tools, these practices, these disciplines to engage with on a daily basis. And also, too, I think people, after having been here for some ceremonies, like we were saying before, plant medicine has the potential to really open you up, and not just on a mental scale, but on a physical level. I feel like as we peel away the layers of whatever we came in with, but the body's more sensitive, the mind is more sensitive, you're more energetically sensitive to your external environment. So if you go back home and you're back in the same office, or you're around your family, especially if there's been toxic family dynamics, you're going to feel that, maybe even more so. You're going to feel maybe like a bit stronger, like, oh my gosh, this felt bad before, but now it feels like suffocating. Like, and you can almost use these experiences as a barometer of like, okay, like I'm doing my inner work. I'm eliminating the things that don't serve me in my life anymore. And I can tell that when I spend time with this person, I feel absolutely terrible. So maybe it's a good idea to put more distance or to create more boundaries with this person. So these are ways in which during the integration process you can almost kind of decipher what's healthy for me, what's healthy for my body, what's healthy for my mind. And it's baby steps along the way, and the changes are sometimes subtle, but you feel so much stronger. You're that much more connected to yourself, and I think from there it's easier to make better decisions for yourself and for your life, for your body, for your mind, and things like that. And that can even go down to diet as well. Both yoga and ayahuasca definitely have changed my diet over the years, and I became a lot more conscious of what I put into my body, a lot more conscious of who I spend my time with, and things like that. And my life has completely changed with ayahuasca and with yoga and everything. But it's been a gradual process. But paying attention to what is good for me, what feels good for me, what feels healthy for me, and a lot of that has to do with the very people that I surround myself with, which is why I'm here with both of you lovely people.
Now, one thing, this work, I find it fascinating because it's really spreading all over the world. When I started working with ayahuasca, nobody really that I knew had ever heard of it. I had one friend who was part of the Santo Daime Church. But now, for example, if I go back to New York, many people have heard of it. There's ceremonies in Brooklyn on the weekends. My question, one, is that a good thing? And what's the difference potentially between doing this work outside of this environment where it's from, versus working with it in some other way? And maybe along with that, what is the way that it's worked with here, like with the curandero, with the set and setting? Is that important? And if so, why? Why is that important?
Excuse me. I spoke about it a little bit. In my opinion, it's very important. And it's also important, who do I choose to work with? So I would say, sometimes people would say, like, this is like a surgery, it's a spiritual surgery, let's say, or in my opinion. If I go to have an eye operation or some complicated surgery, I will make sure that I choose the right person, or I would scan, like, what experience this doctor has. He's going to operate my eye, Well, like, we may see that people come to Peru, and also here, not only Peru, the whole South America, all this medicine is very accessible. And as you said, like maybe a few years ago, you would have to go and to search for people you would work with. Now you get to Iquitos at the airport, you have like ayahuasca here, ayahuasca there, The airports are closed right now, but anyway. So yeah, it's really important to choose the person, So if I'm choosing a person who's going to operate my eye, what would make me feel that I can drink ayahuasca with this random dude from the street, and I think so there is something about the setting, definitely like seeing indigenous people working with the medicine. I think that's a huge aspect of this healing. There is definitely knowledge that is being passed on, that from my perspective it's very amazing and something that cannot be put into words. So and I understand that for many people it's not accessible. Not everybody can afford to fly to Peru, or cannot go for other reasons. But I would say even to go somewhere where the medicine is from, there is a huge benefit of that. But if people go to... I've been thinking about it, like when we've been talking about that it's illegal in some places. I was actually thinking about this question. Well, is it even good that like the plant medicine like travels from the country of origin? And I actually don't have answer for that. I believe that for some people this is the only option how they get in touch with this medicine. So I don't have an answer for that. But I truly believe if people can travel to the place of origin of that medicine and work with people who have deep connection with that medicine, that's very important.
And who are those people who have a deep connection? Like, for example, here it's the curandero, the medico, the doctors. What is their role? Why are they important?
As I also mentioned before, I see this type of medicine where a person goes on a journey, and that's also why we have facilitators, right? It's kind of some kind of safety net of when person goes on a journey, and for some people their reality changes completely. And I believe it's important to have a guide who can guide me on that journey, make me feel safe, who already walked that journey for me, who knows where I'm going through their experience, and who can guide me back, and without like giving any just like bad stories. But I've met people in Iquitos who went for a journey and took them some time to come back from the journey. Like maybe you've seen these people as well, just wandering around and totally lost, and so
there could be a potential downside or danger to working with these plants if that's based.
And I think there's this, like we spoke about it. I think this other time, I remember two of us having conversation about like this expectation that plants are here for healing, and of course with everything, it comes with expectations. The plants are gonna heal me. Nobody expects that something can go wrong. And of course, like with plant medicine, we are walking on some, we are walking on a line. Some of the plants the healers work with, well, not here in our center, but some plants that are being dieted in the Amazon, they are poisonous plants. So where is the line, of a medicine or a poison? But I think in my perspective is that in wrong hands, it can be very damaging, and that's why I would make sure that I work with the right person, and that's. There are also people who would say, "Oh, I will go to the market and get ayahuasca. I will drink by myself." For me, since beginning, like if I didn't have the training that I got, like working with plants, that took me some time, that took me a few years, I wouldn't go and drink ayahuasca by myself. Just out of respect and like knowing that, you know, I should have like proper training and being able to hold space for myself. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, this medicine has, I mean, it's both light and dark, and I think part of the shadow side is exactly what you were just mentioning about, like the potential that it could, be damaging. I heard another facilitator that works here. She's great, Jen. The way that she described the difference in like drinking ayahuasca in an ayahuasca ceremony, say in Brooklyn, New York, versus drinking here. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you may have gone to that ceremony where you had your teeth cleaned, whereas here it's a root canal. And that really resonated with me because I have personally experienced that whilst working here. And I'd say a good probably 35 to 40 ceremonies that I've had in all my ayahuasca ceremonies were not here in at the temple. A few of them were in Peru, but another place in Peru. But a good majority of those were the U.S., Utah, Las Vegas, California, and then when I worked with it out in the U.K. And I worked with a variety of different shamans, never Shipibo prior to working here at the temple. And I won't take away from the experiences that I had, but they were definitely not on the level as what I have experienced here with Shipibo healers. Like I said before, like their medicine and their tradition is exceptional. I really respect the curanderos here because of the amount of time and energy and devotion that they have to spend to learning about these plants and the dieting process and everything. Just as much, it's almost quite parallel to Western doctors. Like their amount of time and energy and effort that went into learning in medical school is very much parallel to the curanderos here. You know, a lot of them start in their teens, starting to train and everything, and they're literally learning for about 10 years or so before they even start to work with people. And I have a huge amount of respect for anyone that devotes themselves to this path like what they have. And yeah, I think when the danger to me when it comes to ayahuasca is there's people that come and spend a month or maybe even 6 months in the Amazon drinking ayahuasca, and then they go back to wherever they're from and call themselves a shaman because they know ayahuasca, they know the plant, they spent 6 months in Peru or something like that. But really the training and the experiential knowledge that like what I would consider a true shaman needs in order to safely hold the space and work with people to the level of what our curanderos here do requires years and years and years of learning and dieting and training. And because of that, like I personally won't just sit in any kind of random ayahuasca ceremony. When I first began drinking, working with plant medicines, I was one of those people because that was all that was really available. You know, I wasn't able to spend a lot of time in Peru like I wanted to. So I just kind of went with what was available and luckily didn't have too many bad experiences, but I know of people that have had terrible experiences due to the set and settings. It just wasn't the appropriate time, space, and the I'll put it in quotes, healer was not an actual healer. So I mean, you're in a very vulnerable position when you drink ayahuasca, you know, and this is why it's crucial to have people around you that can not only hold the space, but that can properly facilitate, that can help if you need help, and things like that, because you are in a very vulnerable position. And depending on the strength of the medicine, depending on if it's your first time, how you might react to it, and things like that, it can be unpredictable. and it affects everyone differently. So you don't know until you've started to work with it, to your own relationship to it. But yeah, it's very important to have people around that you 100% trust and that have experience, not just, oh yeah, I went to the Amazon, had a few ayahuasca ceremonies, and I brought some back. Let's drink.
So can you two talk about because we keep using this word curandero, shaman. I know it's difficult to kind of to speak of it, but what is that person? What is their role? What from your experiences? What are they actually doing? And kind of where's the line between what they're doing and what these medicines are doing?
So I kind of like the concept, and for me the healer is someone, I would say a person who for whatever reason got on their path, but as I was seeing, usually there is something they're healing themselves at the beginning. That's not say that everybody who becomes a healer has something there, but I see it quite common. And from the healers that work here, I would say people who started to work with plants when they were very young, and even some of the healers later on in their lives, and dedicated themselves, what we said, we keep talking about dieting. So the diet is a sort of retreat where a person would go to isolation, would restrict their food, and would restrict other connections with other people. That's isolation. And drinking the plant and connecting with the plant and receiving healing and teaching from the plant. And through this process, the plant is teaching them, empowering them, cleaning them, and becomes somehow their tool. So the maestros here, for instance, they would say that each plant is like a subject they would take in the university, let's say. So for them it would be like a jungle university they go, and I really like the idea that you shared, kind of like medical doctor taking different, and then it crystallizes certain area where they specialize at. And so they would become like masters in there. They would get a master degree in plants, except if it's a jungle university. And I think I already said why this person is important. It's a guide, and it's connection between the plant and, like, I would say that at the moment, what's the difference in the moment while the person or the healer is serving the medicine? To me, again, my personal opinion, the healer becomes the medicine. They get connected, and the healer is calling in or activating medicine in themselves, let's say channeling the medicine in order to use it or help the other person, and that's we were also talking about the healing songs, that are very common, or that even the healers here, the Shipibo healers, work with. Those I found very powerful, even without drinking medicine. The healing vibration that is being transmitted, again, like activating the medicine. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think the S word is a loaded word, shaman. It's the loaded word in the spiritual community. Yeah, basically what Zuzana said. Jungle University, Jungle University with the healers here. Yeah, I think my personal perspective around what for me as a shaman is very much changed, because I had worked with, again quotes, shamans in other styles, other traditions and stuff like that, versus the healers here with the Shipibo tradition, and it's like completely different styles of cleaning, completely different styles of healing, and I'll even go as far out to say like a much deeper version of plant medicine healing that I've ever experienced. I've experienced some ceremonies where the shaman was singing to basically kind of like the whole group. And that was what I was familiar with before coming here to the temple. But then here at the temple, like you get individualized icaros, the pasajeros too, from the healers that are holding the space. And it's, again, with their personal knowledge and tradition with ayahuasca and the amount of time and energy that they learn to understand the plant, and then all the plants that they diet as well, the plants and the trees that they diet and the songs that they learn, the icaros, it's a completely different experience than anything I had before coming to the temple and working specifically with Shipibo healers. The icaros, like talk about deep cleaning and yeah, cleaning, purging, opening the path. And it's kind of what we tell the guests here, you know, the cleaning process, the surgery, like what Zuzana was saying, like going in and really clearing a lot of things away, and then kind of stitching back up, seeing to you to open up a new path for when you leave. And yeah, I have so much respect for the healers here, and it's been very different in my previous experiences with ayahuasca and what I had understood to be shamans. But, you know, shamanism can extend to more than just plant medicines. It can be, you know, energetic work and, you know, other types of modalities. But, yeah.
Yeah, good. So you had mentioned tobacco, and I think tobacco is something that's obviously people know it as cigarettes, but probably most people haven't heard of that as a medicine plant. So could you talk a little bit about tobacco and how that's a medicine plant, and maybe how that differs or is the same from smoking cigarettes?
So here in the Amazon, it's considered one of the strongest plants of the Amazon, and as I mentioned, probably the difference between cigarette and the kind of the rolled tobacco that is being used here, it's kind of obvious. It's not manufactured cigarette. It doesn't contain any added chemicals, but it's a pure tobacco that it's being used here, and it is a long tradition, not only in the South America. And as I mentioned, it is being used in ceremonies and work with other sacred plants, not only ayahuasca, with San Pedro, coca. Yeah, it was interesting for me to meet that or to experience that, because to be honest, when I first started to drink ayahuasca, there was this feeling that I need to deeply purge, to have this purge, and what I would experience was this more like energetical purge or emotional, or and I needed something physically to leave my body. And then I discovered tobacco, and it was like, it's like, this is amazing, the sense of cleaning. Hello. And so yeah, the tobacco, it's something very special for me. And I have to say, even through work with ayahuasca, the work with ayahuasca pretty much goes back to tobacco for me. Like lately, my ceremonies, even by drinking ayahuasca, has been a lot about tobacco, which I found super interesting. And for some time, I had this thing also like being kind of initiated in the tradition of tobacco, and then going back to ayahuasca, I had this like certain clash of like, what tradition is the tradition? Is it team tobacco? Is it team ayahuasca? And I shortly realized that the only conflict there is, it's in my own head. That these plants pretty much work very well together. So yeah, as it's been used in the ceremonies, it's in a form what we called mapacho, which is like rolled tobacco in a paper or in the pipes. So the healers, or also ourselves, we would use wooden pipes and to put tobacco in them. And why it's being used, it's a strong protection. It's a like very direct. We would use it as for a cleaning place, or the maestros, they would use it in a way what we called sopla, which means to blow. So the smoke is being blown in either on people or in the spaces to kind of like help to clean the space. So there is something in energy of tobacco that it's clearing and cleaning, and it's very direct. And then another of the quality is like a deep sense of grounding, and again connecting, like centering. So for me, it's really like grounding, centering, and connecting to divine, whatever anybody wants to call it. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. I love tobacco.
Now, when you say working with it, probably a lot of people are familiar with the smoking quality. If they've worked with ayahuasca, they often see the people running the ceremony smoking. Obviously, most people know cigarettes. But from your experience, there's another way of working with tobacco. So could you just talk a little bit about that?
So it comes in a different tradition. It's actually drinking tobacco brew. So I would say it's a tobacco tea. So in that tradition, you would drink the tobacco. Sometimes you would do what we call singiada. So that's snorting tobacco, again to kind of help clean the sinuses and open energetical pathways. And drinking tobacco in this way, it induces like very deep purge. And that's interesting. Like in the Amazon, like many traditions look at the purging as something that is like liberating, cleaning, making space for something new to enter. And they would also perceive that by purging, we get rid of the phlegm, where phlegm is something stagnant or carries energy that is stagnant in our body. So by cleaning the phlegm that they would see, they would perceive that we have like everywhere in our body, in digesting system, for instance. So yeah, by doing that, like cleaning, liberating, and then after the cleanse, the work starts with the dream space. I spoke about that, like when I mentioned my tobacco diet. For me, it really opened the dream space, and I started to have very vivid dreams, and almost like the dreams started to talk to me. And so there were like different. I started to notice, what it's kind of entering a different reality that sometimes feels more real than this reality. So this would be the way you can work with tobacco as well.
So it's working purging on the physical level, and then you're saying in the dream space, You also said it's a master plan. So what does that mean? That the tobacco is like, it's a teaching plan?
It's a teaching plan. So here in the Amazon, there would be perceived like certain hierarchy of the plants. So there are plants we would describe as a soft plants, similar to herbalism in our countries. Then there would be a plants who are considered as teachers. So those would be the diets with a certain trees, as the maestros are dieting, for instance. And then there are plants that would be considered as master teachers. So those are usually plants that are kind of like the red thread, or like the center of the work that you are doing. So something that you align the medicine to, if it makes sense. So in some traditions it's ayahuasca. In the tradition that I did, it was tobacco. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, so maybe we'll begin to wrap this up. One thing I wanted to touch on is that we're doing this here because the temple's closed, and it's been closed for about 4 months now. We're coming up on the 4-month marker of the whole coronavirus pandemic. So maybe for the audience, could you two speak about just the experience of being here, of kind of being in lockdown for 4 months, what's come up, maybe your thoughts, your feelings about the coronavirus, and just speaking a bit about the time over the last 4 months, if it's not too traumatic.
Yeah. This was the longest March ever.
It's still March, right?
So for people who don't know, in Peru, the lockdown, and I say lockdown because that's essentially what it was. It started, I think, March 16th was the date. So yeah, maybe you guys can go from there.
I was mid-retreat when the lockdown went into effect. And interestingly enough, I experienced coronavirus in a couple of dreams and a couple of ceremonies before Peru went into lockdown. So when it did go into lockdown, as much as it was a bit of a surprise, because they literally gave everyone 24 hours to get on a domestic flight if you want to get on a domestic flight or to get on an international flight, which international flights are mostly out of Lima, a few out of Cusco, but mostly out of Lima, which didn't really give many people the opportunity to get out if they wanted to. But yeah, it wasn't that much of a surprise when Peru did go into lockdown, and I was in the middle of a deep immersion retreat. And, oh my gosh, so much has happened since then. It felt like it was the longest retreat that I've ever worked, that's for sure. I think the last of our guests finally left on a repatriation flight. It was, I think, a week or two into April. But yeah, the style of the retreat had to obviously shift with the times. We were on Center 2. And even just because the guests here are asked to not use their phone, so they can really focus on their journey here. A lot of people had no idea what was happening, and even reading in the news, you're like, okay, Germany just went into lockdown, and this country is restricting this travel and everything. It was kind of obvious that Peru was going to do something about it, but no one expected it to be as soon and as drastic as what they did. But it basically started with needing to let the guests know that, we are, the World Health Organization has now declared that this is an official pandemic. This is what's happening over in Europe. That we just want to let you know so you have an understanding of, things might need to shift around here. And then that pretty much overnight went into, okay, well, we are officially in lockdown, which means that we are not able to even get to the city. We're not even able to get to Iquitos. Do we want to continue the ceremonies? And almost everyone was still game on for continuing working with Segundo and Anita, which were our maestro and maestra during that retreat. But very quickly things, as you can imagine, with the stress that the world was in, it was almost like we had our little microcosm of crazy and dramatic events here. Even shifting like what the retreat was at the beginning versus what it was, say, like 3 weeks into March or 4 weeks into March, which meant we all had to start practicing different like social distancing measures, which is very hard to do when they're all sharing kind of like tambos close by, and even some of the the staff that were returning, as both you, Jason, and Zuzana know, coming in from other places, you both had to go into an isolation just because you were traveling and potentially a carrier of coronavirus. We knew nothing at this point about the virus. As my role changed from yoga teacher to then like helping out with the kitchen and delivering meals to staff tambos, and was I wearing my mask and do I have gloves, and like am I, so much had to shift. The dynamic had to completely turn around to something that none of us were familiar with. We obviously don't have a pandemic protocol here. We do now, though. We do now. And so, just with the stress of trying to get everyone home, which was in different increments as well. The Americans were the very first to leave, and then some Europeans, and then the Australians and things like that. And then a lot of us staff chose to stay here and ride it out in the jungle, which I'm exceptionally grateful for. There's honestly nowhere else I would have rather have been and chosen to be than here in the jungle. But that did come with its share of challenges, because that meant that we were pretty much on our own in an abandoned ayahuasca retreat center in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. The closest city nearby was Iquitos, which is only accessible by boat or by flights, and the boats and the flights were all not operating. So we were literally stuck in the jungle. It's been a wild ride. It felt like one hardcore ongoing ceremony, which I feel actually that I'm like just now emerging from. It's been absolutely amazing. It's come personally. It came with a huge amount of loss and grief for personal reasons, but ultimately it has been a very, very, very powerful chapter in the Amazon for me. And I every time I come back here for chunks of time to work, the duration of my own process with ayahuasca and whatever I'm about to confront or whatever I'm about to learn, it's literally the entire length of the time that I'm here. So literally from the time that I step foot on Peruvian soil, from the time that I am leaving the jungle or leaving Lima airport. It's been one thing after another after another. I'd say it's been blissful. It's been traumatic. It's been incredible. It's been painful. It's been challenging. But all of those things listed are the things that make my soul grow, and it's soul food for me in the long run. And I'm here with the final three, literally the final three, the remaining staff at Temple of the Way of Light, and I am so incredibly grateful for everything that I gained and everything that I've learned through this experience, and I wouldn't change a thing about it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe could you talk a little bit about the logistics? Because I've received a lot of messages from people who were just really curious what's going on, and maybe kind of for you what that process has been like, how the whole thing unfolded.
When Lacey was saying, like at the beginning nobody knew like what this whole coronavirus is. I think we still don't know. Or it seems to me like since beginning and even now, I feel there is so much disinformation, or there is so much information, and it's really hard to like find the truth or like to make any sense out of it. And like since beginning, I was thinking like, I hope this is some kind of bad dream that I was gonna wake up from. By now, I know it's not happening. Well, maybe still. But anyway, the logistic is that we are basically about 2 hours from Iquitos, which means taking a motor car for about 45 minutes, getting on boat, and then hike to the jungle. So when this place is operating, there is electricity, there is kitchen operating, there's usually local staff helping, taking care of like running the retreat behind the scenes. So when we went to the lockdown and after all the guests has left, the lockdown still continued, and we could decide like what we're gonna do. Not that there were many options, but we have decided to stay here. And like for me, it was the first time spending over 3 months in the jungle without leaving, without going to Iquitos. And of course, I'm super grateful for being in the nature, being on fresh air. Basically, we don't wear masks here. We are on a fresh air and kind of isolated. So yeah, this has been amazing. But after some time, there's definitely certain things that I would say I miss. And yeah, it kind of feels like I resonate with what Lacey is saying, that it's kind of this long ceremony. It definitely has been beneficial. Definitely many stuff came up for me. It felt like drinking medicine without drinking medicine. And I think it's a combination of these kind of like rough conditions, like a little bit rough. Rustic, thank you. Conditions and this sense of I'm in the lockdown. Like I cannot leave if I want to, or like I cannot go back to my country. A lot of course, insecurity, uncertainty about the future, because we don't know like what's gonna happen in the whole world, like and I'm wondering if there is even like going back to normal. I think there definitely will be like a new phase for all of us, and I think it was a very important part to go through this experience here for me.
How about you, Jason?
Yeah.
What are you taking from this, and what did you get from this? And
this is your interview.
But we want to ask questions as well.
Well, but before that, just one thing. So, what are your thoughts about the coronavirus? I mean, I'm sure both of you have been on quite a journey. As you said, there is so much information or disinformation. So what do you two think about the whole situation?
I think it's so many different things all in one. I think it's tragic. I think it's very challenging, but at the same time, there's like whenever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity to grow and to rise up and to, find a new path or sometimes it's just a matter of being adaptable and flexible to situations as they are. I personally I have been fortunate enough to not be so affected by it that I haven't lost anyone to it, for example. It's been interesting and for me a bit sad and kind of disheartening with the way that I see how people, again, this could be a chance to, in a sense, support one another and almost in a sense like rise up as a collective for humanity. But I'm seeing a lot of division. I'm seeing a lot of nastiness just in the way that some people handle some situations or talk down about this or spread this, and then it's unfortunately broken a lot of, like even what I see on social media and people that I know, friends and family, like how it's broken friendships or dissolved relationships or, things like this. But at the same time, I just like I trust the medicine. There's something about like I part of this practice is coming back to myself and trusting that there's something to be gained of this on a personal level, absolutely 100%, and how I handle this, my reactions to things and circumstances and things that are outside of my control, but also just it's inspired me to be more compassionate as I witness my own reactions to the news, the media. I was glued. I have a couple news apps on my phone, and I disconnected from social media initially when Peru first went into lockdown. I signed off of social media for about 2.5 months, but on the same token, I was glued to my news apps, and just in the way that a lot of these articles were written and the numbers of coronavirus and the lockdowns here and there, and it was so much to take in and so much for my brain to process, and quite overwhelming. And we all kind of went into our own little ceremony around this pandemic, and there's also a sense of like loss and mourning and grief, even if it was just for the plans that we had for the summer or the plans that we had for 2020, or for a lot of so many people are. Mosquito. So many people have lost their jobs, have lost their livelihood and things like that. And in a time where I feel like we need extra support from one another, it's turned people against each other. And I find that to be really sad and unfortunate. But, I'm an optimist, and I hope that we all kind of rise up from this, and something better is to be gained, even if that's change, even if that's for a lot of these things that I feel are kind of related to coronavirus, even the political unrest and the way that a lot of these countries have handled the pandemics and things like that. So I feel like they are connected on some level, but I'm hoping as a collective we come together eventually and support one another through hard times, really, really hard times that no one in our lifetime has ever really had to face. So, yeah.
Like I said, like since beginning, I was also like reading a lot, like different articles, and there were so many like conflicting information and basically so much information, and there was like, I don't know what to believe, I don't know what the truth is, I don't know where, this is crazy. But what I truly feel that coronavirus is, I believe that it's somehow a lens or like this something that shines the light on the aspects of the society or us that it's not healthy. That's something that I believe that I see, and like of course I'm also sorry for everybody who lost their loved ones, or I was also lucky that for me personally like my close friends or family were not affected. Here in Peru, I've had a few friends who've lost their loved ones, and it also breaks my heart to see how still at this point, even though we are out of lockdown, apparently the coronavirus is spreading into the communities and into like very distant places where where there are people without any help. So that's also heartbreaking. But at the same time, I keep wondering, like in this country or in like many communities where even the healers that work for us, the people are so much affected, and there is so much knowledge about the plant medicine and about healing. So it's kind of paradox that these communities are being affected, and almost like they cannot help themselves with the medicines they have. I know that, of course, I've read some news about like Brazilian tribes, and I know that some of our healers, they also they prepared plant remedies and medicine to heal their communities. But I mean, in general, even between like the people here, the trust in the plant medicine, it's not very strong. So again, I lost the track there, but yeah, kind of feeling that it's really pointing at something where us as society are unhealthy. And I also see that it kind of suddenly I couldn't imagine that something like that could happen, like to stop the world for like 3 months and encounter like Peru. I was just like, this is insane, to lock everybody in their houses for over 3 months. What was it, like 104 days, wasn't it? 6. And in some regions of Peru, the lockdown still continues, So not even in my wildest dreams, I didn't imagine that. I was like, oh yeah, that's going to be maybe a few weeks. And then it was like another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks. So yeah, and what I'm hoping that I'm also hoping something really good will come out of this. And for me, it was, also beautiful, as I say, like brutal and beautiful at the same time, like to be here. And very much as a ceremony. And as the same thing we say to people when they come here, like the 3 most important things: trust, patience, and concentration, were the main things that kind of helped me to go through this. I'm still going through this, I guess.
Who could have predicted?
No. And also, if somebody told me, you're going to be stuck here till like middle of June with Lacey and Jason, you're going to be the last 3 months who stay here.
Survival of the fittest.
No, but I see also very positive, we have received so much help from the village that is close by to us. There was one of the women was helping us to actually get our shopping here, to get our food delivery here. So there was also something beautiful about like helping each other. So I saw this. There was definitely like not only I can see the aspect where this whole thing turns people against each other, but there was also this like huge belonging and like helping each other. So see.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I could probably talk for hours, and I think we're getting over 2 hours now. But some of the things you all mentioned, very much like a ceremony, and those are the kind of the 3 pillars we often teach are patience, trust, and concentration or surrender. And that's certainly something I had to do myself with this whole process as well. And from my own experience, the kind of the emotion or the state that I feel and I've seen that really holds people back is fear. That essentially fear is the primordial state that so many spiritual traditions, there's this idea of heaven or the Garden of Eden or union, bliss, and oneness. And from that, there's this split into duality. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's the manifestation of the universe. There's a me and a you, a man and a woman, a night and a day. And much like you were all talking about, there's the light aspect of this work, and there's the dark, and they're both equally as important. But that fear is really that primordial emotion that arises from that split. The idea of what happens when I don't exist, and all of these, what we would call, I think, negative emotions arise from that: anger and jealousy and, clinging and grasping. And, but, for me, when I see people acting from a place of fear, and especially seeing through these kind of government-mandated lockdowns and things that are coming from this place of fear, that's always something that really I have to look much more deeply into something. And I think, like you were mentioning, you know, all of this information and conflicting information, and I think we as a society, we very much relied on certain institutions, whether it's, you know, churches or authorities or governments or, you know, the World Health Organization. And I think what we're seeing is, you know, truth is very difficult to actually navigate what that is. And I think when we relegate one view or one body as to this is true, we deny all of the other views of what's true for other people. And also, as you all were mentioning, you know, one of the beautiful things about this is the human connection and how people can come together. And I think that's a huge part of this work, too, is, you know, for me, what this work is really pointing towards is union, is connection. And when we have division, that's the antithesis of that. And things that cause division, it's really beautiful. And in the Shipibo language, they have this idea of hakun. And hakun, that means good. Hakun ma is not good. But in a deeper level, they would say that which is good is that which serves nature, or that which is true, or that which unites. And that which is not good is that which divides. And so for me, I think a lot of these policies, they've ended up creating division in the name of good. And much like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, whether these things ultimately came from a place of good or good intentions, I guess is also debatable. But also, as you said, I think I am an optimist. And I think most of these people were coming from a place of good, of, you know, we're trying to do the best we can, we're trying to protect. But it's one of the things for me with this work too, is that, you know, we have these beliefs, we have these ideas in our mind of I know, and I hold on to that and I grasp that. But in the end, when we can see things from the other side, there's a surrender, there's a letting go. And so these ideas of, you know, I know what is good, not only for me, but I know what's good for you, I know what's good for this country, I know what's good for the world, that inevitably creates division. And it's often based on fear, and one of those huge fears is this fear of death. And one of the maestras who you mentioned, I was messaging her, and she said it really well. She's like, you know, why is everyone going crazy? We're all going to die anyway. Why is everyone so worried? And, you know, that's a very wise statement, and it's not to take away from actual people suffering and dying, because that is part of the reality, and people have died from this, and people die of so many different things, and it's not that we don't try and prevent death, but for me, it's also the manner in which we do that, and if we're fighting that or resisting that or afraid of that, I think all of our actions, they end up dividing rather than uniting, and I think, you know, part of the consequences of this are things that are very sad, which is, you know, for example, here at the temple, this place employs so many people. And now that's going to be a year where these people have no income, and they're living, you know, on day-to-day wages. And a lot of these families are going to have to, you know, become split. Like I was talking to, you know, one of the ladies you mentioned, and maybe her husband is going to have to go into Iquitos now and find other work. And, you know, just this whole shift of people's lives. And there can be a beauty in that too. You know, something new is created as well. But, you know, even these ideas, I think, of like social distancing and separation, I mean, that's really what it is. It's a separation. It's a lack of connection, and almost this idea of looking at everyone as if they're a potential carrier of this virus, you know, and it breeds this certain type of fear, you know, rather than this actual connection. And, you know, just these heartbreaking stories of even people on their deathbed where they weren't allowed to be with their family. They had to look at them through a plexiglass barrier because there was this fear that they would be contaminated. And it's, you know, that to me is insanity. That's the loss of humanity. I saw a photo today of a school somewhere that opened up, and the children are all sitting at separate tables in the name of their own welfare. And, you know, for me, that's insanity, that we're in a sense losing that human connection. And so I think if anything good has come of this, I hope that it's a real appreciation of what is important in life, of these things like connection and community, and how important that is, and family, and just how valuable these things that we take for granted in life really are. And you know, that's a huge process of what we were even mentioning, these ideas of dieting. You know, something like dieting is social isolation and deprivation, and there's an important time in one's life for that. But I think also what that process really teaches is how important life actually is. And there's this gratitude and humility that arises from life of actually realizing through deprivation, like, what is super important in life. And, you know, for me, probably the philosophy that's most touched me ever since I was really young is this idea of Taoism. And it's something I really see in this work, which is, again, this idea that the human being, the mind, tries to grasp, it tries to understand, it tries to know, and that's a noble pursuit, and we should all follow that. But also, there's a limit. There are things that can't be known, and in our quest to try and know everything and control and make the world how we want to be, the consequences of that can often be far worse than the very thing we're doing. So, two of my favorite quotes in the Tao Te Ching are, let go of the common good, and the good becomes as common as grass. And the other one, which is even more simple, which is trust in people, leave them alone. So anything else either of you would like to say? I think we're at like over 2 hours now. So anything you'd like to leave us with?
Stay calm. Trust, patience, concentration. Breathe in, breathe out. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like I say, I'm very positive about all this. I also need another coffee, so.
Yeah. There's not much. Oh. Things are very uncertain right now for myself, for both of you, for everyone, for the world and everything. But yeah, I'm feeling more peaceful than I have over the last few months, and like I said, I'm an optimist. I think really good things will come of this. But just like in ceremony, you know, you got to take a dip into the deep end sometimes, into the dark, uncomfortable, shadowy stuff, the pain and the whatever label or story you want to attach to it, the trauma, whatever it is. But I really believe that we will emerge on the other side of this, like, as just better people, better humans. Who knows what the timeline on that is? Certainly not overnight. Probably not even within the next 6 months. But yeah, I'm hopeful. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much for coming on. It's a pleasure, and I hope people were able to learn something from this. And I'll put up links to the temple, to maybe any social media you guys have, any information you want to share.
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @Serpent Lacey. There I am. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. So I hope we can do this again.
Another pandemic.
Coronavirus. Yeah. All right. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you are able to take a few minutes and leave a starred rating and a review, that would be super beneficial to helping to spread this show. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. Thank you in advance if you are. There's also a link to a Patreon account and a direct donation link. If you're able to give anything, that would be really, really appreciated to help keep these podcasts running and to help support this work. As I've mentioned in the previous two, and we talked a little bit in in this podcast, basically this work has been shut down now in Peru for the last 4 months because of the whole coronavirus pandemic, and probably we won't be able to start for another 4 to 5 months to go. So any donations would be deeply appreciated, and if you are able to do that, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. I'm putting a link to Lacey and Zuzana's their bio, a photo, social media links, everything will be in the show notes. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next episode.